In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Okay, so where did we leave off? Let's see. Anybody remember?
Changing sides, Abner.
Okay, Abner changed sides, and why did he do that?
Because Ishbosheth saw Abner with Saul's concubine.
Okay, good. So who's Abner and who's Ishbosheth?
Ishbosheth is one of Saul's sons.
Okay.
Abner was like his commander-in-chief.
Commander of the army, yeah. So after Saul died, Ishbosheth became king of Israel, and Abner was his commander of the army, just as he was for King Saul. And then Ishbosheth accused Abner of
taking over his king.
Taking over like one of the Saul's concubines, like being with his concubine. And so Abner was offended by the accusation, so he said, I'm going to go and help David become king of all of Israel. At this point, David was king of Judah only, and so he told him, I'm going to help him to become king of all Israel. And then what happened? Where did Abner go?
He got killed.
He got killed, but before he got killed, he went where?
To David in Hebron.
Right, he went to meet with David in Hebron, which was like the capital city of the kingdom of Judah at the time, which was like King David was the king of Judah. And then what did he tell David? He's going to support him, and that he's going to go and tell all of the elders of all the tribes of Israel to support David to be the king of Israel. Okay, and then Abner leaves, and then who comes right after Abner leaves?
Joab.
Joab. Who's Joab? Commander of the army of David's kingdom. Okay, so remember, Abner is commander of the army on Saul's side, who's dead at this point, but the kingdom that Saul set up. And then Joab is the commander of the army on David's side. So what does Joab do?
Kill Abner.
And why did he want to kill Abner?
Because Abner killed his brother.
Abner killed his brother earlier. His name was Asahel.
Yes.
So Joab wanted to get revenge on him. Okay, good. Then what happened?
Sorry, is the chief of the army still heading Saul's old?
Abner.
Abner's, okay.
Yeah, Abner was the commander of the army when Saul was alive, and he remains the commander of the army now under King Ishbosheth,
Okay.
which was Saul's son. Okay, good. So after Abner dies, what happened after that?
Someone killed Ishbosheth. I forgot who.
So there was two captains of the army, okay, and they went, and essentially people didn't have trust in Ishbosheth. Even Abner didn't have trust in him. That's why everyone is kind of like saying, you know what, David's going to become the king. We might as well get on David's good side now and help him so that he will reward us when he becomes king. So these two captains of the army, now that their commander, Abner, is dead, they said, you know what, we're going to help David to become king. And so what do? They kill Ishbosheth. And they take the head of Ishbosheth, and what do with it?
Show David.
They bring it to David. And they're expecting that David is going to be so happy, and he's going to reward them because Ishbosheth is dead, which means nothing is standing in the way now of David becoming king of all of Israel. Okay, but what does David do?
He gets angry.
He gets angry and kills them. He says, what? Because you've killed the anointed of God. He was anointed to be the king, and you've killed him, and so he kills them. Then we're going to kind of see now what's going to happen is actually everything that Abner did when he was still alive actually had an effect, right? And now for the first time we're going to see everyone kind of like joining around for David to become king here in chapter 5. Then all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and spoke, saying, indeed, we are your bone and your flesh. Okay, so they're saying, you know what, we're one people. We're not different people. We're one people. Also, in time past, when Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel out and brought them in. And the Lord said to you, you shall shepherd my people Israel and be ruler over Israel. Therefore, all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. Okay. So how many times total was David anointed king?
3.
3. What were the 3 times?
First time with Samuel, second time at Hebron, third time here.
Okay. which is also Hebron.
Oh, yeah.
But this time it was anointed for all of Israel, whereas the previous time he was anointed only for Judah, for the tribe of Judah. Okay, so and the first time he was anointed, it was in secret, right? So Samuel the prophet went to his house of his father Jesse, and he anointed him, and it was a very small gathering of people. Now, people found out later that he was anointed to be king, but it was originally, the anointing was done in secret. But now the anointing is done in front of everybody, okay? And again, we see how God continues to confirm his will. Sometimes when, God gives us a promise of something, and we're like expecting this promise to happen, and things begin to go in all kinds of weird directions, completely maybe feeling opposite to what God has said, and yet God continues here to confirm that his will by continuing to anoint him, again and again, first in secret, then over Judah, and then over all Israel, so that God is gradually fulfilling the promise that he made to King David even when he was a boy. Okay, and this is important for us to remember. Even though King David was anointed to be king when he was still a boy, the consummation of the promise, like the actual promise, came true much later. So when we're like feeling that God is like we're waiting for God to do something, and that it is His will that it happen, we sometimes need to wait a long time in faith, waiting for this to take place. The other thing that's interesting is that these people now that are saying to David, "Oh, you're bone of our bone and flesh of our flesh," like we're buddies and we're together. Well, where was this before? Where was this when you were trying to kill me? Where was this where you were, even though you knew I was the anointed of God as the king, and yet you were still with Saul and you were trying to fight me and to kill me and to find me, and I had to run away to another country to flee from you. You might imagine that someone in that place would hold a grudge against them and say, you people are wicked. You knew all along that I was supposed to be the king, and you were supporting this man Saul who had been rejected by God. But he didn't do this. He accepted from them like what it is that they were saying, and he accepted this commission to be king, and he didn't try to punish these people. And we see this again and again with David, because David is not taking upon himself to punish anyone who has harmed him personally. Now, if you think of every person that we've read about that has harmed David personally, David has not tried to kill them. Whether it be Saul, or whether it be later on when we read about this person whose name is Shimei, he mocks David and he curses him, and also David does not try to kill him. Everyone who's harmed David personally, he doesn't touch them. For instance, Joab, when he went and killed Abner, like David mourned over this. Like this is something that he was sad about. And yet he didn't try to punish Joab. He didn't go to Joab and say, well, you know what, because you've done this, I'm going to kill you. But when is the time that he actually would like execute capital punishment on someone? Based on what?
When they murdered the anointed.
Yes. So when it's related to God himself, like when someone dishonors God or dishonors those who have been selected by God, then he carries out justice against them. So you see that David expressed this kind of an anger, which we call like a righteous anger. Sometimes when we get angry, our response is that we want to take revenge and retaliate against those people who caused us anger. But this is not what David was feeling. This is not how David acted. He responded in anger only in a righteous way, in a way to correct an injustice, which had to do with God himself. So David placed God above himself. If someone were to mock God, if someone were to attack God, if someone were to disrespect God, then he would quickly dole out punishment on them. But if someone attacked him, and if someone insulted him, and someone disrespected him, then he wouldn't do anything. He wouldn't retaliate. Okay? And he would just have patience and wait for God to bring him justice on his own.
Which is so counter to everything that we know of. Every single time that anyone tries to anyone just says a little thing to us, we just want to go and get our self-respect back. Whenever anyone says anything about God, oh, you're entitled to your opinion, even though everything you said was completely and totally wrong about God, and you're it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
With us, it's that is completely foreign. Anyone who sees, it's still foreign to me. It's I can't. It's still kind of hard to comprehend. The enemy of David, the leader of his enemy, when he dies, he mourns after him. Who does that? No one does that except someone who really knows God. Just shows you how much God will literally change your heart and change everything in your life.
That's right. That's a good point. Anybody want to add to that? David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. Okay, so for 7 years, so when we read about David becoming king over just Judah, he was king over just Judah for 7 years. Right? It took so long for, even now that Saul is out of the way, someone might have thought, okay, all that we're waiting for is for Saul to die, and when Saul dies, David is going to become king, and the promise is going to be fulfilled, and that's it. Well, actually, no. After Saul died, David remained king for 7 years just over Judah only, and there was no unity in Israel. The tribe of Judah was separated from the rest of the tribes. Okay, and so only now, that David is now going to become king over both Israel and Judah, and he reigns another 33 years over the entire kingdom. So he was king for 40 years total overall. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, who spoke to David, saying, "You shall not come in here, but the blind and the lame will repel you," thinking David cannot come in here. Okay, so what's happening now? Why is David doing this? Okay, so we said what? The king and his men. So David goes to Jerusalem. Okay, so what's in Jerusalem?
Oh, the Jebusites took over Jerusalem, right?
So the Jebusites were the original inhabitants of Jerusalem, right? So remember, all this land was controlled by all the different Canaanites, right? So we say all these different terms, right? Canaanites refers to the people that live in Canaan. This whole land is called Canaan. So if you read like in the Old Testament, like when you're reading about Moses and coming into the promised land and so on, this whole region that we now call Israel was called Canaan. Okay? And it was dwelt by the Canaanites, which are all the people that live in Canaan. But in the Canaanites, there was all these different subgroups, okay? Like these different people, different races of people living there. Like, for instance, the Amorites and the Amalekites and the Jebusites and the Perizzites, and all these people are different people living in Canaan, okay? So this is one group of people that was living in Canaan all along. They're called the Jebusites, and the city that they lived in was called Jebus, okay, which is now called Jerusalem, because it was called Jerusalem after they took it over. But it was originally called Jebus. God had ordered the Israelites from long before now to have wiped out all of these Canaanite people from the land when they first took it over. And if you read in the book of Joshua, when the Israelites first come into Canaan and they start winning battles, and God starts letting them win battles, and they took over many, many people and many, many lands. But they reached the point where they kind of stopped. They got like, okay, this is enough war. We're going to, some of these people, we're going to try to make peace with them. Some of these people, we're going to try to, make them our servants. And all these different things, so that they didn't completely wipe out all of the other Canaanites that were there in the land. And those people ended up becoming their downfall. Like those people are the ones that caused them to start, intermarrying with them, starting to worship idols with them, starting to do all these things. And that's why God had told them from the beginning, you have to get rid of all these people because they're going to be a snare to you. So they didn't. And so one of the groups of people that remained was these Jebusites. Okay? And they were living in the city of Jerusalem, or Jebus, all throughout this time. So now, why is King David going there now?
Take it over.
He's taking it over. And why does he want to take it over?
Complete God's mission?
Hmm?
To complete God's mission?
Well, that's one reason. But why specifically now, and why here?
Because he has the unity of all of Israel behind him now.
He does. So it'd be a lot easier now to wage war, really, against anyone than before. Okay? But more specifically, why Jerusalem?
Because it's located in Judah?
Well, one reason is it's at the border of Benjamin and Judah. Okay? It's at the border of Benjamin and Judah. And why is that important? Because remember, Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. And Ishbosheth also, his son, was from Benjamin. And Abner was from Benjamin. Right? But he is from Judah. So when you have a city that's close to like both tribes, it's kind of like a compromise, kind of like neutral ground where you say, okay, we can have the capitals. And that's really the point, is he wants the capital city to be here. Right? He wants the capital to be here. So where was his capital of Judah before? Was in Hebron. Okay? And the capital of Israel before was Gibeah. okay, which was the original city where Saul came from. So now the capital is going to move and become in Jerusalem. Okay, so that's the first part. So what is this now that the Jebusites are saying? They're saying, you shall not come in here, but the blind and the lame will repel you. What does that mean?
They're underestimating him.
Who's underestimating him?
The Jebusites underestimating David.
They are underestimating him, but so what are they saying?
That like he can be defeated by even the blind and the lame.
Yeah, so he's saying even our blind people here and our lame people in our city, Jebus, can defeat you, David. Like you don't stand a chance against us. Okay? And why is it that they would think that?
Didn't they have like advanced weaponry?
No, it wasn't because that was the Philistines.
Oh, okay.
The Philistines are the ones that had like the metal weapons. So Jerusalem was like, one of the advantages of Jerusalem was that it was an extremely fortified city. It was on a mountain, like when we say Mount Zion, okay? Zion is one of the mountains that Jerusalem is on. So everyone who wants to attack Jerusalem has to go uphill. Also, it was surrounded by mountains and it had valleys on 3 sides. Okay, so it was extremely hard to attack Jerusalem because of the geography, right? So essentially, they're so fortified in the city, and they don't think that David is gonna, or anyone is gonna be able to come and to attack it. Okay? Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, that is the city of David. He called it after himself. Now David said on that day, whoever climbs up by the way of the water shaft and defeats the Jebusites, the lame and the blind who are hated by David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. Therefore they say, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house. Okay, so what did David do? He offered what?
Positions.
He offered a position to the person who could do what? Who could go and to defeat the Jebusites. And he told them by way of the water shaft. So it said that there is like a water shaft that's like hewn into the rock on the side of the city, and it's like very difficult to climb, but that would be the only way you could get into the city, because remember, these are like fortified cities with walls around it. So this would be like the best way to get in. And so essentially he's saying, anyone who can do this, I'm going to make you chief. And if you read actually in the book of Chronicles, so if you're familiar with, you have the book of 1st, 2nd Samuel, and then 1st, 2nd Kings, and 1st, 2nd Chronicles. 1st and 2nd Samuel are chronological, 1st Samuel and then 2nd Samuel. 1st and 2nd Kings are also chronological. They come after 2nd Samuel and they continue the story of the kings. So it's like 1st and 2nd Samuel are focusing mostly on Samuel and David and these things. After that, 1st and 2nd Kings talk about all the other kings that come after David. But these books, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, they're kind of a retelling of history from a different perspective. You'll find sometimes that there's retelling of the same stories that you read, almost sometimes even word for word, the verses are the same. Other times you get more detail about something that you read previously in Samuel or Kings. So here in 1 Chronicles chapter 11, actually we read about this event where David asks whoever, I'm going to reward whoever is able to climb up and defeat the Jebusites. It says, now David said, whoever attacks the Jebusites first shall be chief and captain. And Joab, the son of Zeruiah, went up first and became chief. Okay, so even though here in 2 Samuel, it doesn't say anywhere who actually is the one who was able to climb up and to do this, but we know 2 ways we know. One is we know that Joab was the commander of the army. So we know that he was given this position of being the commander, and also because it's stated again in 1 Chronicles chapter 11. Okay. Then David dwelt in the stronghold and called it the city of David, and David built all around from the Millo and inward. Okay, so after he conquered the city, he named it after himself. This Millo, it's not like there's different opinions about what it is. There's no clear picture on what it really is. Some people say that it's a fortress that he built to protect the city. Other people say that what he did is he took like dirt and rocks and he filled the top of the mountain with dirt and rocks to essentially expand the building surface that he could build at the top. And that the Millo was essentially this project of filling in all of the dirt and everything to expand the size of Jerusalem. That he wanted to expand the size and he couldn't. Okay, and again, the word Zion refers to one of the hills that the city was built on top of. So when you hear about Zion, like, or when you hear about King David talking about Zion, or in the Psalms, it's referring to the mountain that Jerusalem is built on. So David went on and became great, and the Lord God of hosts was with him. Then Hiram, the king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, and cedar trees, and carpenters, and masons, and they built David a house. So David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. So I think here, just so we can kind of see where this is. Okay. So if you see here, yeah, see right there, Tyre. So that's what we're talking about. Okay, this is where this kingdom is that they brought. Like this area, like near Lebanon, is very famous for its like huge cedar trees. Okay, even till today. So they got these cedar trees from here so that they can build David a house, essentially like his palace that he would be king in. And David took more concubines and wives from Jerusalem after he had come from Hebron. Also more sons and daughters were born to David. Now these are the names of those who were born to him in Jerusalem: Shammua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Nepheg, Japhaiah, Elishama, Eliada, and Eliphet. Okay, all of his children. Now when the Philistines heard that they had anointed David king over Israel, all the Philistines went up to search for David. And David heard of it and went down to the stronghold. Okay, so the Philistines are still in the picture here. Okay, they heard that David had become king, and now they want to search for him and find him. The Philistines also went and deployed themselves in the valley of Rephaim. Okay, so is there a map here? Yeah, so you can kind of see where this is. So here's Jerusalem, okay? This is the new location. Here's Hebron down here. So this is where David was before in Judah. This is the tribe of Judah down here. And this is the tribe of Benjamin up here, okay? So the city of Jerusalem was near the border of Benjamin and Judah, okay? And this valley of Rephaim is here near Jerusalem. This is what we're talking about right now, okay? The Philistines are on the west side here of Israel. Okay, so this whole area here is the Philistine area. So David inquired of the Lord, saying, "Shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hand?" And the Lord said to David, "Go up, for I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into your hand." We see again something here that's been a pattern in the life of David, that whenever he's going to get ready to do something, he always asks God first. We always see, he says, and David inquired of the Lord. Okay, so he always wants to know what is it that he wants to do. Previously to this, when David was still thinking about coming and becoming the king of Judah, he asked God if he should go to Hebron, and that's when God told him to go. So David went to Baal Perazim, and David defeated them there, and he said, "The Lord has broken through my enemies before me like a breakthrough of water." Therefore he called the name of that place Baal Perazim. Okay? And they left their images there, and David and his men carried them away. So the images are like the idols that the Philistines worship. They were left there, and David and his men took them. Then the Philistines went up once again and deployed themselves in the valley of Rephaim. So there's two battles actually here. The first time, and now the second time. Therefore David inquired of the Lord, and he said, "You shall not go up. Circle around behind them and come upon them in front of the mulberry trees." So the first time he asked God, "Shall I go up directly and attack them?" And God said yes. The second time David asked God, "Should I go up and attack him?" And he said, "Don't go up directly, but circle around from behind and come upon them in front of the mulberry trees." And if David hadn't decided to ask God in this time, like, what is it that I should do and how should I do it, he wouldn't have gotten this advice from God. And God is now telling him to do something different than what he did the first time. And it shall be, when you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the mulberry trees, then you shall advance quickly, for then the Lord will go out before you to strike the camp of the Philistines.
What does the mulberry tree look like?
What is the mulberry tree?
What is a mulberry? Like, are they big trees?
I don't know, actually.
It's like a blackberry type of, it's like a bush more so than a tree.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the what the significance is specifically of the mulberry trees. If there's something unique about them. Yeah.
Okay. I was curious. It just seems like a very specific thing.
No.
Like, it's amazing, like, God's giving him more sense.
Like brush trees and blackberry.
I mean, it's possible that that area just had a lot of mulberry trees, and so it was known as being, as opposed to being like a very specific set of trees. I don't know. Yeah.
But this is one of the valleys around Jerusalem, right?
Yeah. That's that valley of Rephaim.
Okay. So yeah.
So yeah. So right here, right? So it's right up by the city. Okay, right here.
Okay.
And David did so as the Lord commanded him, and he drove back the Philistines from Geba as far as Gezer. So again, to show you kind of where that is. So you see here, Gezer is way back over here. So he drove them from this battle here in the valley all the way back here to Gezer. This is back into Philistine territory. So he drove them all the way out of the country. Okay, that's chapter 5. So we see in chapter 5, David gets anointed to be the king, and then David has these. David takes over the city of Jerusalem as the capital city, and then he wins 2 battles against the Philistines. Okay, a lot of things happen in this chapter. As David becomes king over the whole nation, it's like God is confirming to the entire nation that he is working through David, right? Remember, David is the anointed king from a long time ago, and David is the man after God's own heart. So just as when Saul became king, God gave him like decisive military victories, which demonstrated that he was the protector of Israel, that he was the one like serving Israel, and that God was using him to serve the people and to help the people. So also here now, immediately after David becomes king, God is using him to win these victories against the Philistines, also to foster like this national unity, right? That there is unity. Now remember, for 7 years, there hasn't been unity because the tribe of Judah has been separate from the rest. And now he's like showing how much he's using David to kind of bring everyone together and to demonstrate that he can protect the entire nation through David. Any questions about this chapter?
When they listed David's sons, that's like the total sons after until his death, right? Not by this time, because Solomon is was one of them.
Right. This was at that time. Not like he has more sons than this. Right. Solomon's here actually.
Yeah.
But for instance, it doesn't list Absalom.
Okay.
You know, it doesn't list other sons. Okay, but this is just some of his sons.
So he has
Those
two
are the ones
Solomons.
only born.
No. This is the Solomon. This is the same Solomon. Here. Sorry? Yeah, born in Jerusalem and born at this time. I mean, this isn't necessarily an exhaustive list of all of his sons. Yeah.
So does he have daughter? He has at least one daughter, right?
Yeah, but usually the daughters are not mentioned.
Yeah, they don't say that.
Yeah.
So
They're getting even more kids at this point, most likely.
how many wives does he end up taking? Does it say?
I don't know the exact number, but he has a lot.
Because he keeps picking up wives.
Yeah. I mean, like as a reference, King Solomon, his son, he had like a total of 800 wives and concubines. But he was an extreme, though. Like that was usually 800.
And his lifespan?
800 wives and concubines.
What was his lifespan?
David, he lived to be pretty old. Because, I mean, he's already, now he reigns for 40 years at this point. So he's going to be like well into his, close to 80, 90, something like that. Yeah. Okay, so chapter 6, we focus back again on something that we had talked about a long time ago, which is the Ark of the Covenant. Remember, the Ark of the Covenant is what represents the presence of God with the people. And it's like one of the most sacred items that they have. They didn't have a place for it. Remember, the Ark of the Covenant was something that was traveling around, like with the people, while they were wandering in the desert. And now when they came to Israel, like it was in one place, and then they tried to use it to help them against the battle against the Philistines. The Philistines took it over, and then eventually it was returned, and everyone was dealing with the Ark in a way against the commandment of God. And this has kind of been the trend. Like when you try to understand the Ark of the Covenant, it's like it's holiness. It's like pure holiness. It's like God Himself sits on this Ark. Okay, so the way that God wants people to deal with the Ark is very specific, and He's given very specific commands. He's even allocated a certain group of people whose entire job is to deal with the Ark. Okay. So, for instance, when you wanted to transport the Ark from one place to another, it had to be done in a very specific way. When you offered sacrifices, it had to be done in a very specific way. The tabernacle itself, if you were to read all the chapters talking about how the tabernacle was to be built, it was extremely specific, even to the dimensions of everything, right? So God has in His mind a very specific plan, and He communicates that to us, to the people, and He appoints people to be responsible for carrying it out. Okay? And this is important to understand this chapter that we're about to read. And it's also important to understand what we read previously. Because previously, people would be so ecstatic, for instance, that the ark had been returned from the Philistines. And then what was the first thing that they did? Well, they opened it up and made sure that everything was inside. And that was completely wrong. No one can open the ark. No one can even touch the ark. So those people who were so ecstatic that the ark had been returned died. And had plagues and diseases and all kinds of stuff because they dealt with the ark in the wrong way. Okay, so tells us something about the holiness of God and how the rules that God sets out for us are important. They're not just something we can take for granted. They're not just something we say, oh, you know, well, God just looks at the heart. Well, yeah, He does look at the heart. But if we know what it is that we should do and we choose not to do it because we think it's not important, then He's gonna look at that too. Okay, so that's that. We will be judged on that, and we're going to understand more about this in this chapter. So, just for the sake of people who might not know, what is inside the Ark of the Covenant? What is the Ark of the Covenant?
I assume on Indiana Jones.
On Indiana Jones. Yeah.
Had the two tablets by Moses.
The two tablets of the Ten Commandments. Okay, good.
Made of acacia wood covered in gold inside and outside. The cover has like two cherubims covering it like that. The contents inside two tablets of the Ten Commandments, the rod of Aaron that blossomed, and the pot of manna.
Okay, good. So all of that. So
That's it?
So the Ark of the Covenant is something that they had they built it at the time when they came out of Egypt, and God told them how to He essentially told them to build a tabernacle, which is the house of God, that God will be traveling with the people all throughout their time in the wilderness. Okay? And the Ark of the tabernacle, which is where the Ark of the Covenant was stored, was like at the center of the camp. So imagine that for 40 years you would be living in tents, and that the center of the camp is always going to be the Ark of the Covenant inside the tabernacle. And that the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies, into the tabernacle once a year to offer a sacrifice for the atonement of the sins of all of the people. So the Ark of the Covenant is really, really important. Like even the high priest, who was like the most consecrated person set apart for the service of God, would only see the Ark of the Covenant like to offer a sacrifice once a year. And when it would be transported from place to place, it would have to be covered so people would not see it, and it would be transported by a certain group of people, again, that do not touch it, but they carry it on poles. So it has like these big rings, and you would carry it like on your shoulder, like walking, like 4 people could carry it like on your shoulders. Okay? So and all these rules were very clearly spoken of. Like God explained this. Like this wasn't left to just kind of figure out the best way. Okay?
Question. The Ark was never found, right? The Ark of the Covenant?
Today,
So as of today, it's been lost. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims that they have it, but we don't. I mean, as far as I know, I don't think we
They
acknowledge
have
that.
it in Ethiopia, or?
I believe so. That's what they say.
The Nazis didn't take it.
No, it's not like Indiana Jones. Yeah. And we don't know where the Holy Grail is either. Okay. Okay, so it says, again, David gathered all the choice men of Israel, 30,000. David's army has increased in size dramatically. Remember, originally he had just a few hundred. And David arose and went with all the people who were with him from Baal Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, whose name is called by the name, the Lord of hosts, who dwells between the cherubim. Okay, so dwelling between the cherubim, this is the two cherubim that Sharif mentioned that are on top of the lid of the ark. Okay, this is where God would appear to the high priest. Okay,
The mouse is on the second screen. You can click it there.
okay, let me go here. Baal Judah is another name for Kirjath Jearim. Kiriath Jearim. This is this city right here. Okay, so this is where they're going. Here, Kiriath Jearim, which is Baal Judah here in the text. Okay. So they set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, and Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drove the new cart. Okay, so right off the top of the bat here, what's happening? What are they doing? They're wanting to transport the Ark of the Covenant from Kiriath Jearim, which is Baal Judah. They want to move it to Jerusalem. Okay, and how are they doing it? On a cart. Is that good? No, not good. Okay, because there was nothing that God said about moving the Ark of the Covenant on a cart. Okay, and previously, actually even in more recent history, back during the time of Samuel the prophet, when they were fighting against the Philistines, they tried to move it around on a cart and it completely failed. Okay, the other thing to understand is that these men, Abinadab and Uzzah and Ahio, these people are Levites. Okay,
Know better.
who are the Levites? They are the priests. Not all of them are priests, but all of them, like the sons of Aaron. So Aaron is the son of Levi. All the Levites are like serve in some way, like serve the tabernacle and the temple of God and serve the holy things. The sons of Aaron specifically are the priests, but all the other sons, they serve in different capacities. There was one whose name was Kohath. Kohath and all of his descendants are the ones that deal with transporting the ark and these things. Okay, so these people are all Kohathites. They are all the ones that are responsible for transporting the ark. They know everything about the ark. Like this is their whole life. This is their whole function. This is their whole job. This is all that they do. They don't go and study something to have a career in something else. This is their career. This is it for them. Their whole purpose is this. So for them to come and say that we're going to move it by cart is ridiculous. Okay, like just to try to understand from, like maybe to us it seems like it's not a big deal that they're moving it by cart, but it was a big deal. It was a big deal to God. It was a big deal to these people. They should have known better than this. And they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, accompanying the ark of God. And Ahi went before the ark. Then David and all the house of Israel played music before the Lord on all kinds of instruments, and fir wood, on harps, on stringed instruments, on tambourines, on sistrums, and on cymbals. Like they're so happy because now they have a unified nation, they have a capital city, they're going to move the ark to the capital city, and this represents the presence of God with the people. And so David is very happy, and it's like a big party celebration, and they're here moving the ark. And when they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. Okay, so what do you think of this?
Bad things can happen.
He touched it, but he was trying to keep it from falling. Should he have just let it fall? Huh?
I mean, that would have been the will of God.
Yes.
Well, remember, the will of God is that they're not even transporting it on a cart to begin with. There shouldn't be oxen, right? Like they're already like transporting it in a way that it could cause something like this to happen. Like if the oxen fall, if the thing falls over or whatever. So they're walking with it, and then okay, the oxen stumble, the thing is going to fall over. So Uzzah puts out his hand out of instinct, just to, I mean, any one of us would have done that.
But it would be God's will for the oxen to stumble, right?
No, why? Why is it God's will?
He wants them to stop.
No, but it's not time for them to stop.
They're traveling against his will, like in the manner that they're traveling.
Right, the manner that they're traveling, they should have never traveled this way, right? They should be carrying it on poles. Okay. This is not to say that God intentionally caused the oxen to stumble. This is just a natural event, or something that can happen at any time. It doesn't mean that something happens has to be the will of God making it happen. It's the natural event that happens naturally in the world, that the oxen stumbled. But the consequence for it revealed one of the, the problem of why they shouldn't have been doing this to begin with. Okay. Then it says, then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error, and he died there by the ark of God. Okay, so what do you think about this?
On the one hand, you feel really bad for him,
Because he was just trying to help.
but at the same time, it's like all these things were set up in a way that was completely against God, So that's like essentially like in like a few square feet, heaven on earth, or like supposedly, it's the presence of God, right? And anything that's like unholy, or not even anything unholy, just anything not holy. You don't have to be like a heathen, but it's just anything that's not heavenly. Like it touching it is like it can't happen, So it's like I don't even think I think God was probably angry, but I think it's more the fact that it was just a natural consequence. Like you can't have you can't have that mix,
But do you think maybe God was unreasonable for setting those rules to begin with? Why couldn't he just been more lenient? If he knew that people with good intentions were going to do that, why?
Well, he said that about a lot of things. When good people are why don't you just be lenient and then just let them continue to make mistakes? It's not the way to live life.
Okay.
Is this like a foreshadow of the verse in the New Testament of our body being the temple of the Holy Spirit? And how we worship?
I mean, certainly, there's a lot of analogies from, the temple and the tabernacle in the Old Testament to ourselves in the New Testament. And yes, it is showing, the holiness. But I think what I'm trying to get at is sometimes we have the attitude of, we're almost we're too practical. We think about everything in the practical way. And then practically, okay, well, it's a big deal. He was helping and just put it out and get it on his way. That's why something like this, a lot of people, when they read this, they get offended by the story. They're like, well, why would he kill this man? He didn't do anything. What did he do? Okay, maybe he made a mistake, but to kill him,
Because if you had just followed the original instructions, it would have never been on a cart.
It wouldn't have never been on a cart. And, but what I'm trying to say is that God is more important than people. And we tend to do the opposite. We tend to put people as more important than God. So our needs are the most important needs. And if according to my knowledge and my understanding, it makes sense that if I'm just trying to innocently help and do something maybe that was against the rules, but according to my mind, it's practically, it's right, it's good. I'm helping, even though it's technically wrong, we think that should be legitimate. Because really in our mind, we're thinking that our way, our logic, our understanding, people is better than God's strange, archaic, hard to understand, backwards rules that we don't understand them, right? But that demonstrates something incorrect about us, and that attitude can be reflected in other things. For instance, many Christians, when it comes to for instance, sexual relationships outside of marriage, God defines what marriage is. He says it's a man and a woman. And sexual activity can only happen within marriage. Okay, but then you have people that come and say, well, I'm technically not married to this person, but we love each other and we're monogamous and we live together. And it's the intent. It's the same intent that God had. This is God's intent. God's intent is that we have faithfulness. God's intent is that we had, but that's not what God said. you're extrapolating the intent of what God has said, and you're disobeying the command of God according to your understanding of what you think is right and wrong, and your conscience is clear because you feel like that's what matters. So this fundamentally goes to the idea of, do we follow what God said, or do we try to extrapolate what he meant, what he means, and then we try to interpret that and do what we think he means, do what he think he wants, but at the same time disobeying what he actually said, right? And if we think about it, we might find that there's a lot of situations where we do this, where we try to put words in God's mouth, we try to put thoughts in his mind, we try to imagine that we know what he wants, that might even contradict what he says, and what he says isn't really to be interpreted in that way because it just doesn't make sense, right? And so our idea of what makes sense ends up being the criteria for obeying God. And if it makes sense, then I follow it. If it doesn't make sense, oh, well, God doesn't really mean it, right? But this is an example of a story where maybe none of us, had the Bible not said that this was going to happen, maybe none of us would have thought that God would have done this. Maybe none of us would have imagined that this would have been the outcome. Maybe we'd have all said, just give him a second chance. Like, it's okay. He was trying to protect the ark. But when you see God's actual reaction, then it makes you wonder, well, how does God react to the things that we do? Maybe the things that are along these lines of, am I placing God above me, or am I placing myself above God in terms of right and wrong and morality?
I think it also has a lot to do with, like it's not just like clearing your conscience and doing what you think is right. I think it's more of a self-justification. Like you probably know that it's wrong, but because of, like you said, like it's more like it doesn't make sense, or like the whole world is doing it. Like I see all these people, they're doing it, and it's right, and it feels good, So what they're doing, they can't be wrong either, So I'm just gonna self-justify and use all these reasons, and that's not the case. I remember saying that he said that theology is not. It's not given to you by speculation, or it's not given to the church by speculation, but by revelation. So you don't think about something and try to go into the scripture and try to prove it. No, God comes by revelation, and tells you what it is.
That's right. And like sometimes we also have the idea that we're going to do something, and if God doesn't kill me, like he killed Uzzah, then he must be okay with it. Like if I do something and there's no immediate backlash, there's no immediate consequence, lightning doesn't hit me, like nothing really, really horrible tragedy happens, then God must be okay with it. And we test God in that way, and we go with many things and kind of thinking that, if God doesn't stop me, then he must be blessing it. But that's not. It's not at all. In some cases, like in some cases, God uses certain examples or certain events as an example for others. This is one of those. If God were to punish absolutely everyone who sinned against him by killing them, everyone would be dead, right? It's God's right to do so. He can choose to do that. That's the consequences, actually, of all these things. But God, in his patience and his mercy, often stops from doing that. So why in this specific case? God can use a situation like this to explain to us the seriousness of the holy things, of his holiness, and how we should be revering it. What's another example that comes to mind that God used people as an example in the New Testament, in the book of Acts?
Where he punished someone?
Mm-hmm.
Sapphira and her husband.
Yeah, Ananias and Sapphira, right? What happened with them?
They lied to who was it?
St. Peter?
To St. Peter about what they're donating.
Right. So they said they were going to sell all their land and donate it, but they only donated part of it. But they said they donated everything, and then they were struck dead because it says they lied against the Holy Spirit. So again, this is an example. If everyone that were to lie were to be struck dead on the spot, then again everyone would be dead. God used them as an example. It says in the book of Acts, and everyone was afraid. Like there was fear, like there was seriousness, there was a sense of like, okay, what we're doing is like serious business. Like this is not just something like a trifling matter. This is not just something we can take casually or take lightly. The same is true when we come to church. Like the church is not something we should take lightly. Like this is the house of God. Like when we come in, the way that we're dressed, the way that we talk, the way that we act, the way like everything that we do should be like having in our mind like this is a holy place, and I can't just come into it thinking that it's just like anything else. It's just like going to the movies. It's just like, staying at my house. It's a special place. It's a place where we need to come in with a sense of reverence and holiness, not just coming in like I'm here for a little while, and what can this place do for me? No, I'm here there to worship God and to bow down at his feet. It's a very different attitude. And these kinds of events like this teach us that of what does it mean and how serious is the holiness of God. And David became angry because of the Lord's outbreak against Uzzah, and he called the name of the place Perez Uzzah. So Perez means, or Perez Uzzah means like the outburst against Uzzah, or like something that like happened against Uzzah. Okay, so and David was angry at what happened. Okay, why was he angry?
Just because the Lord struck Uzzah?
Because he was upset at what God did to Uzzah. Again, like what we were just talking about. Like we're thinking, well, maybe this is unreasonable. Maybe you should have given him a second chance. Maybe you should have been understanding. Well, David also thought those thoughts. He thought to himself, well, why do this? Was it really something so bad? But for all the reasons that we said, yes, he wasn't justified in that anger. And actually also keep in mind that God, like David has been asking of God so many things. It says, and inquired of the Lord, inquired of the Lord, inquired of the Lord. Well, this time he didn't inquire of the Lord. If he would have asked God, okay, we want to move the tabernacle, or we want to move the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, like what would God have said? He wouldn't have said, put it on a cart. He would have told him exactly what to do, and he would have listened to him. But here, this is an example, like David didn't ask. David was so excited. You can see his excitement of moving the ark to Jerusalem, and he's like almost like beyond, like he's not even thinking. He's just like in the moment.
And I assume that the ark was taken before David was even born. So this is probably like the first time he would see the ark, and probably that is not ever familiar with how like the ark deals with.
Yeah, it's not clear. I mean, but the other people would have been, and even if David had commanded the people to do this, they should have been the ones to say, no, we can't do this, and here's why, and show him the Torah. Like the Torah was available. The Torah is the law. Here's look where God said this is how we should deal with the ark and so on. And
But why would David question God here, but something as simple as the guy who came from supposedly killing off Saul, he didn't question it, not a minute. He just offed him right away.
So in that case, he already knew the God's command. It was actually the command of God that anyone who would touch the Lord's anointed would have those consequences. So it wasn't that David was acting out of his own like emotional response to, oh, I'm so angry because you killed, Ishbosheth or whatever. He was like executing God's commands. Here, though, he did the opposite because he was so excited about the idea of the Ark of the Covenant that he wasn't thinking straight. Like he was impulsive, right? He wanted to do this immediately, right? And he was impulsive about what he did. It reminds us kind of also how David was whenever Nabal refused to give him food when he asked for food for him and his men. His first instinct when Nabal told him no was, I'm going to go and kill him, right? Instead of kind of taking a step back and thinking, well, what are the consequences of what I'm about to do? Here also, if David had thought and said, okay, what is the right way to do this? Maybe in his mind, I don't know what he was thinking. A cart is much faster than carrying it on poles, or I don't know. But in his mind, like he just wanted to get it done. Like there was a party. He was having a party, like all these instruments, and now suddenly this thing happened. It's like the party's over. Nobody's excited anymore.
But he wasn't a Levite. Like he wouldn't know the exact instruction. He wouldn't know, like, yeah, so that's the other thing, God, that's the commandment of God. Okay, that's clear, you should know that. But the very, very exact things, like you said that it was only those people who should know.
Well, they're the ones that are the most familiar, and they're the ones that are going to, raise up the red flag immediately when something isn't exactly right. But all the people knew that they could not touch the ark. All the people knew, like, for 40 years in the wilderness, every single person observed the way that they would tear down the tabernacle, and the way they would set it up, and the way that they would move the ark, and the way they do everything. It was done always the same. So this isn't like a secret. It's just that those people were the most familiar with it.
So this Uzzah, who was also transporting it, was familiar with it.
Yeah, because he was a Levite.
according to David's, following of like what we were talking about earlier, and he only off the ones who, were harming the anointed of God, then this would still fall within protocol of
It would.
of God's commandment.
It would, except David was the one who told them to do this. So he's not thinking that way, right? Like he's not thinking this is wrong. He's not doing it thinking it's wrong. He's doing it thinking this is fine.
So he has no idea.
It's not necessarily that he doesn't have any idea, but perhaps he didn't think it was going to be a big deal. Perhaps. Because he should know. Like, it's kind of like, like maybe people who are not priests, like don't know all the details of the prayers that the priest prays on the altar, but they know that it's the priest is the one who prays at the altar and not other people, right? You know enough. David knew enough to have made the right choice, but he didn't. And it's like David is not a perfect person, like, and the Bible doesn't try to present him as a perfect one. When you read about David with Bathsheba, you hear the worst, like the worst of a person, not just the worst of David, like the worst of a person is like shown and on display. So the Bible by no means tried to present people as one-sided and making us think like they're somehow superhuman. Like one of the nice things about reading stories like this is it reminds us that even the people who are chosen by God make mistakes and can get angry and can be wrong and can be stubborn and can fall into adultery and all this, because it gives us hope about ourselves that we are frail and yet God can still use us the way he used David.
How long ago was like the traveling in the wilderness from at this point? Like from like the time of Aaron and Moses?
I would say, I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly, but I would say it would be anywhere from like 150 to 200 years, something like that.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't like 400 years, like the captivity to like...
No.
Okay.
Yeah. David was afraid of the Lord that day, and he said, "How can the ark of the Lord come to me?" Like he was afraid now because he's like, we have to handle this so carefully, and if we don't, then something like this can happen. It's like, I'm afraid to have this. And this is, again, like we had seen this theme earlier on, is that the ark either became a blessing or a curse to people. For the people that used the ark and transported it and touched it and disrespected it and used it in the wrong way, it was a curse. For instance, to the Philistines, when they captured the ark, they thought it was going to be like a great thing for them. Like they've captured the ark of the Israelites, like it was a demonstration of their power over them and so on, but it ended up being a curse. Like God kept cursing them through it. And even when the ark was returned to the Israelites that did not use it the right way, it was also a curse for them, and God killed thousands of people who didn't use the ark in the right way. But you're about to read, okay, it says what? So David would not move the ark of the Lord with him into the city of David, but David took it aside into the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. So see, like this man who, obviously respected the ark and obviously knew what it was to have it in his house, it was a source of blessing for him. So this is true about God, okay, for us. The presence of God for us can either be a blessing or it can be a curse. It's a blessing if I'm with God revering him, but it's a curse if I am dishonoring him, right? So it's not just that, like for instance, we wear crosses, it's not just because I have a cross. Like, am I honoring the cross? Am I revering the cross? Or am I cursing the cross? How is it? What is my life? Am I a Christian by name only, which is actually worse than being an unbeliever? Or am I a Christian that actually follows through with God's command, and I confess whenever I sin and so on? Like it's not just a symbol that has no power. It's a powerful symbol, and we have to honor that symbol. We have to honor the presence of God being with us so that it doesn't become something against us. Now it was told King David, saying, "The Lord has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him because of the ark of God." So David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with gladness. So it's almost like he said, okay, well, he's had it for 3 months and everything is okay, so maybe I can go and move it now and it'll be okay. Just to kind of read it from the book of Deuteronomy, these are the commandments of God that he gave the people before they entered the promised land. And God laid out ahead of time, like what would be the consequences of disobedience. This is what he says. He says, if you do not carefully observe all the words of this law, he's talking about the Torah, that are written in this book, that you may fear this glorious and awesome name, the Lord your God, then the Lord will bring upon you and your descendants extraordinary plagues, great and prolonged plagues, and serious and prolonged sicknesses. Like, God is making it very clear, if you do not obey my words, then all these consequences are going to come to you.
That's terrifying.
And so it was, when those bearing the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, that he sacrificed the oxen and the fatted sheep. Okay, so now, okay, they're carrying it the right way. They're carrying it on the poles. Not only that, after they walked 6 steps, they offered like a sacrifice to God. Okay, like as a kind of so it could be that the 6 steps represents like, you work for 6 days and then you rest on the 7th day. That this is kind of like we took 6 steps and now it's a kind of like a consecration. Like we're consecrating our journey, the remaining way to Jerusalem, like showing like again like the holiness of what it is that we're doing. We're not just doing this casually. Then David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was wearing a linen ephod. Okay, so David took off like his royal garments, and he put on like this simple like linen ephod, like demonstrating his humility, okay, before God. So David was mourning, okay, previously because he was sad about what happened to Uzzah, but now he's again joyful as like the ark will enter into Jerusalem. In Psalm 30, verse 11, it says, "You have turned for me my mourning into dancing. You have put off my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness." And this is what David experienced here. Is like he was extremely happy, then he was extremely upset, and then he was happy again. Like now that like he's reconciled this in his mind, and they're continuing this journey of the ark. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. Now as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, Michal, Saul's daughter, looked through a window and saw King David leaping and whirling before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. So remember, who is Michal? She's Saul's daughter, okay? And she's used to living in the palace. She's used to the royal life and everything. And now she sees her husband who took off his royal clothing and he's like running around and dancing and doing all this stuff. So she felt like this is beneath him and she like despised him like because of this. Also, she didn't share his enthusiasm. I mean, David's whole focus is he's so excited that the ark of God is coming into Jerusalem. She's not thinking about that. She's not focusing on that. She's just thinking my husband is making a fool of himself. Like, this is what is in her mind. But it says what? So they brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place in the midst of the tabernacle that David had erected for it. Then David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And when David had finished offering burnt offerings and peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. Then he distributed among all the people, among the whole multitude of Israel, both the men and women and men, to everyone a loaf of bread, a piece of meat, and a cake of raisins. So all the people departed, everyone to his house. Then David returned to bless his household, and Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, "How glorious was the king of Israel today." She's sarcastic. "How glorious was the king of Israel today, uncovering himself today in the eyes of the maids of his servants, as one of the base fellows shamelessly uncovers himself." So you see, she's very concerned in like his image and his appearance, and she doesn't understand the significance of what's happening. So David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord who chose me instead of your father and all his house to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord over Israel. Therefore I will play music before the Lord, and I will be even more undignified than this, and will be humble in my own sight. But as for the maidservants whom you have spoken, by them I will be held in honor." So he's saying, this was not about the people who were watching me. I was dancing before the Lord. I wasn't dancing before the people. She was so concerned with the opinion of the people toward him, and he was only thinking about God. Like nobody else was present in that moment in his eyes except him. Therefore Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. So this barrenness was like a punishment that God gave her because of the attitude that she had.
Didn't Saul give Michal to another guy whenever David left?
Yeah, Palatiel.
Okay.
And then, so we read about this last time. So David asked for his wife back from King Ishbosheth, and so Ishbosheth took her from her husband, who wasn't really supposed to be her husband because she was already married, and gave her back to him. And it says Palatiel like was running behind her weeping, so he was not happy. Okay. Glory be to God forever, amen.